Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll keep waiting. Thank you for joining us early on this Tuesday afternoon. Thank you, Danielle. Hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As people log in, we will begin shortly in about 2 minutes. Thank you for your patience. Okay, welcome everyone. I think we have a good number to get started. We have a lot of exciting content to go through today. So again, thank you on behalf of Cooperatives and Mutual Canada and Biosocial Canada. We are delighted to have you among us today on this very interesting topic. We are going to look at how cooperatives can leverage social procurement opportunities as suppliers. So you've probably heard of Biosocial Canada before, and we'll get to know more. So we have with us Tori Williamson, who will be presenting today. She's the Manager of Communications and Engagement. And I will just start with a brief introduction first, and then we'll move on with Tori's presentation. And so I wanted to start to recognize that Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada's headquarters is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. So we extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples for their valuable past and present contribution to this land. We also recognize and respect the cultural diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So about Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. I'm Nadia and I'm a project manager for Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada for the Investment Readiness program. So most of you probably know Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada. It's a national bilingual apex organization to support the development of Canada's national ecosystem of cooperative businesses. And to learn more about CMC, we encourage you to visit the website canada.coop. Just to give a bit of a brief context on the Investment Readiness Program, it's a program funded by Employment and Social Development Canada, ESDC, and it was launched to prepare the social purpose organizations for the Government of Canada's 800 million Social Finance Fund, which was announced in 2018. The IRP was built to support social purpose organizations to access social finance, and cooperatives are amongst those that could qualify. The program funding cycles are now closed, and they will be announcing the different entities that have received funding, and you will be able to learn more through some of the platforms that we have put in place. So Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada's role is really as an awareness builder. So we are within the Ecosystem Mobilization Initiative, and we're here to just share information and for you to just learn more how for cooperatives to engage more in the social finance ecosystem, but also for other partners to better understand the cooperative model. And so to learn more about our role in the IRP, you can visit our web portal. It's at irp/ppi.canada.coop. There we have a wide range of resources, not only to look over the cooperative sector, we also introduce the IRP program, and also how to access the funding. We also have a list of service providers. So if you want service provider, we really encourage you to sign up so that we can showcase the services that you're providing for cooperative development. So visit the website, and if you have any questions, you can contact me at innovation@canada.coop. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and I will hand over the floor to Tori. Tori, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Nadia. And as Nadia mentioned, my name is Tori Williamson, and I'm the Manager of Communications and Engagement at Biosocial Canada. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I'm really excited to be speaking with you about social procurement and how cooperatives can leverage social procurement opportunities as suppliers. Biosocial Canada is a social enterprise with the mission to advance and grow social procurement. We believe that the purchasing of goods and services are more than an economic transaction. They are the means to build community capital, the foundation of healthy, vibrant communities. We are social procurement leaders and work with social value suppliers, all levels of government, institutions, businesses, and communities to help harness the power of purchasing with impact. We're really excited to be speaking here with you today. I'll note that Nadia is going to be monitoring the Q&A, and we will have time for questions at the end of the session. I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, S4ES, the Social Enterprise Ecosystem Project. S4ES is a partnership between organizations across Canada, including Biosocial Canada, the Canadian CED Network, Chantier de l'Économie Sociale, Social Enterprise Institute, Social Value Lab, and our most recent partner, Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada. The goal of S4ES is to achieve multiple deliverables in order to increase the sector across Canada. So these include building networks and community engagement, measuring social enterprise impact and value, creating access to capital and investments, expanding market opportunities, and enhancing enterprise skills. So thank you S4ES for your support today. Now, let's dive into social procurement. We recognize that globally, our communities face challenging and complex social, economic, and environmental issues. These include issues like local economic resilience, homelessness, social isolation, employment challenges, skills gaps, and now most recently, COVID-19 impacts and the path to recovery. At the same time, we see that the public sector collectively spends billions of dollars through procurement. $200 billion is spent annually, with approximately 80% taking place at the local and regional level. When we look at what the federal government is purchasing, about 18 to 20 billion is on goods and services, and 180 billion in infrastructure is scheduled over the next 10 years. So there's a large volume of spend that's happening that's going to external organizations outside of government, but it's money coming from the government. When we think about social procurement, it's about leveraging a social value from existing procurement practices. Traditionally, trading between communities has been around for thousands of years. First Nations and Indigenous communities traded their products across and among families, tribes, regions, and cultures. This included dried fish from the coast for maize and sweetgrass from the prairies, gems and stones for shells and quills. And always this was to enhance each other's lives. However, with the colonization of North America came a different marketplace model, one based upon extraction and exploitation, one that evolved in Western Europe in the 16th through 18th centuries. When we think about social procurement, we go back to that traditional model. When we focus on best value for money, procurement is much more than a financial transaction. Procurement becomes a tool for building healthy communities. Best value for money considers more than economic capital. It considers community capital. Social procurement does not diminish the economic value of fulfilling a purchasing need, but rather it increases the total value of the transaction. When we include a social value component in our supplier selection criteria, then the market transaction creates value for the community. We refer to this as community capital, which describes the total asset of a community that the community benefits from and can be invested in community development. So you can see here we have economic capital, which is your income, finances, capital. Then we have cultural capital, which includes culture, diversity, respect. Then we have social capital. This is the glue that holds our communities together, family, institutions, and networks. Human capital includes skills, learning, and training. And physical capital is both natural and manufactured. Together, these is the foundation for healthy communities. So let's go back to basics. What is procurement? Procurement in this equation is the purchaser value, so the value of that good or service that is being bought. And then the supplier value, the dollar value that the supplier will receive from that transaction. And together, this creates the economic value of that transaction. Whereas social procurement is encouraging a shift towards procurement based on achieving multiple outcomes in addition to maximizing financial value. So here in the equation, we've added in a social value to the existing purchasing equation. And in the end, you don't just get that economic value, but you get that community value. So purchaser value plus supplier value plus social value equals community value. Here we can see the evolution of procurement. As I mentioned earlier, that traditional model of price and quality that developed in the 16th and 17th century has evolved. We can see in the 1960s, the green movement occurred, and now we're all considering what the environmental impacts of our purchases are. And that's growing and growing even more today as we tackle climate change. Now in the 2000s, we're looking at procurement as a tool to create social value and adding in that social consideration to your procurement practice and decisions. When we think about social procurement and ways to understand social value in purchasing, the concentric circle model takes into consideration the context of your market and what different suppliers are available to meet that purchasing need. You can see at the center, the model contains social enterprise. Social enterprise are businesses with a central mission or purpose who reinvest the majority of net profits into that mission or purpose. Cooperatives like Woodshop Co-op and Solar Power Investment Cooperative Edmonton are cooperatives as well as social enterprises. Cooperatives that don't meet that social enterprise definition still create social value as the business structure is focused on social responsibility and sustainable development. These businesses are then found in the second and third reign as local business with a social value or regional business with a social value. You can see in between each of those circles that I've mentioned, there's the supply chain. This is another place where we can incorporate social value into our purchasing and into our economies. As a cooperative, you can increase your social value by looking at your own supply chain. Can you purchase from a social enterprise, another cooperative, or a business with a social value? We'll get into that a little bit more in our third webinar of this series. But if you're thinking about it as from a supplier perspective, can you become ingrained into a supply chain and create social value in that way within the economy and increase your business and therefore increase your social value creation? Okay. So if you're thinking about engaging in procurement, there's a few things to consider. If you've worked on grants before, you'll understand that they can be a lot of work, and same with public procurement. But please know that it gets easier as you go. There are several benefits of selling to this market, including revenue diversification, refining your business model, gaining valuable feedback. And remember, you are more competitive than you think. With social procurement, we are prioritizing and giving extra value to organizations like cooperatives who are creating social value through their business. Here is an example of social purchasing. Woodshop Co-op is in Vancouver. Another social enterprise called Community Impact Real Estate has a social procurement policy. So when they searched for office furniture, they chose to purchase from Woodshop Co-op. Woodshop Co-op is a certified social enterprise using all reclaimed or sustainably sourced materials for their furniture, millwork, and custom woodwork. They are a worker-owned cooperative and employ people with barriers to employment. So not only, if you do business with Woodshop Co-op, you have the financial economic value, but you're also creating the environmental impact from their reclaimed and sustainably sourced materials, and you're creating the social capital from the helping the workers within the cooperative, and the human capital because they're providing training for people with barriers. I mentioned in the previous slide the local business kind of having a higher place on the concentric circle model than the regional business. So when we think about the economic impact of local suppliers, you've heard about, trying to buy local, but why is that? What's the actual tangible impacts of buying local? When we look to Local BC study from 2019 on the economic multiplier effect, we can see that for every $100 spent with a local office supply business, $63 was reinvested locally. So that $100, 63 stayed within that local economy and then was recirculated. For every $100 spent with a multinational corporation, only $14 was reinvested locally. That local reinvestment comes in the form of profits, so profits being made by that local business, payroll, wages being paid to local employees, purchasing, the supply chain of that business, and philanthropy, if a local business is more likely to give to local charities and organizations. So we've talked about social purchasing, which is the purchasing of goods and services, but social procurement has another pathway, which is community benefit agreements on infrastructure and land development projects. Now we'll dive into what community benefit agreements are and what the potential opportunities are there as social value suppliers. Community benefit agreements are opportunities on infrastructure and development projects, and it's an agreement between communities, developers, and government. There are 4 key opportunity areas: employment, skills and training, social value in the supply chain, and community development. We have a case study of a community benefit agreement. So Infrastructure Canada has the Community Employment Benefits Initiative, which is a type of CBA. CBA is Community Benefit Agreement. We've worked recently with the City of Surrey on their coastal floodplain adaptation works. So this is 13 projects over the course of 8 years. On this project, they had to identify CEB, Community Employment Benefit target groups, that they would try and create employment and contract spend opportunities for on these course of these 8 years. So this is really exciting because the long term of the project allows the city to work with the community. We had stakeholder engagement with the construction sector, Indigenous organizations, nonprofit, and social enterprises to assess what the current state was within the ecosystem and within the community to create opportunities for those CEB target groups. And from that, we've now created a sustainable procurement guidelines. And on the project, the city is targeting that 20 to 30% of employment hours will go to CEB target groups, which include groups like women, youth, veterans, Indigenous people, people with disabilities, and a few more. And then 50% of the contract spend. So 50% of the entire budget for the coastal floodplain adaptation works and for these projects, which I believe is around 170 or 180 million dollars, will go to small, medium, and social enterprises. So that's really exciting to see that huge target and trying to create those benefits within the community from this infrastructure development. Another example of a community benefit agreement is Embers. The City of Vancouver required local hiring and purchasing as part of a community benefit agreement for a development contract for an expanded casino. The result was a social enterprise day labor subcontractor experienced significant business growth and employment for more people with barriers. So a lot of the time, when we're thinking about that concentric circle model again, you can see, okay, the city has to do this contract and they're going to pick one supplier. That's going to be their general contractor, their tier 1 supplier. And they're requiring that community benefit from that supplier. So then that supplier goes to their supply chain and sees how can they look to hire from businesses that hire from local people. And they were able to find this social enterprise. This was in Vancouver's downtown east side that hires local people and provides them training and job opportunities in construction. And so they were able to find that tier 2 supplier that was able to meet that community benefit agreement. So with social procurement, you're often thinking about layers within the supply chain. And as a social value supplier, you can think about who is buying these goods, who are they selling to too, you know, or if you're selling to somebody who has that tier 1 contract with the government, maybe that it's important for you to communicate the social value that you're creating for them, so then they can communicate it further up their supply chain. Here we have a case study of Solar Power Investment Cooperative of Edmonton, who I mentioned previously. Spice is really interesting because they're thinking about themselves as a social enterprise and a cooperative, and they're thinking about themselves as both a social value supplier and a social value purchaser. So as a supplier, they are contracting for communities and creating green energy within communities. So they're creating that community benefit through their social procurement as a supplier. They do solar power projects within communities and employ local people. And then as a social value purchaser, they recognize that if they're putting in these solar power projects, they are doing construction, they are hiring people, they have suppliers in their supply chain. And so they're going to be thinking about, can I put a community benefit agreement onto these projects and try and ask my suppliers, can you please tell me what social value your creation? Can you commit to hiring local people? Can you commit to engaging with social enterprises? Can you commit to trying to incorporate cooperatives within your supply chain and trying to act as a purchaser who is then asking your supply chain, what social value can you create through this business? Social procurement is an opportunity. It is increasingly demanded by communities and required by other levels of government. The social purpose business sector is growing rapidly. You can see from that S4ES list of partners that there are many groups across Canada who are working to promote social purpose business. Nadia mentioned the IRP and that I want to say it's like 800 million, the social finance fund coming in down the line. So that social finance fund is seeking to create investment and financing opportunities for the social purpose sector. And that includes social enterprises, cooperatives, and really trying to increase the business impact of these organizations in order to then create their social impact. So when you do business with a cooperative, you're supporting their sustainability and community-minded goals. There are exemptions in trade agreements that support social value. So we can see if your cooperative is a nonprofit, there are opportunities within the trade agreements, which when we're talking to government purchasers always come up in conversation, as you want to make sure that everything you're doing is legal, but there are ways to work with social procurement in trade agreements. And we have a document on our website if anybody's curious about learning more about that. And we can see that business as usual and lowest price is king is understood to be both unsustainable and harmful. I hope that everybody here, if you're not exposed to it already, really understands that that lowest price model that sees exploitation and environmental degradation we're really trying to move away from that. And I think cooperatives are a big part of that as well, is recognizing that, that race to the bottom and trying to get your highest profit possible at any cost is having huge negative impacts on people and the planet. So what can we do within our economies to move away from that, to move to a system that creates opportunity, that creates healthy, vibrant communities? If you're thinking about yourself as a supplier, who are your potential purchasers? Who is looking for social value from their suppliers? Biosocial Canada works with, like I mentioned, different levels of government, corporations, and institutions. We have here the Public Service and Procurement Canada, Employment and Social Development Canada. These are two leading ministries that are engaged in social procurement activities. And then Infrastructure Canada has their nationwide CBA initiatives through the community employment benefits. We work with municipalities across Canada. So we've got the City of Edmonton, City of Calgary, the City of Brampton are all working on the social procurement. And there's a very cool project in BC called the Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative. This initiative has 25 municipalities who are all joined together to access resources, training, and consulting in order to put social procurement into practice. And on their website, they have some fantastic examples of what this looks like, from a CEB project to looking at a city's credit card spend. You know, a lot of cities have people who have, can purchase anything under $2,000. And maybe those people are automatically going to Amazon because it's easiest. But what if they were shifting that spend to a local business, a local social value supplier? Then that would be money better spent, but taxpayer dollars better spent. There are corporations like Chandos Construction and SAP, who we work closely with, that are really leading the charge and making commitments to put social procurement into place in their supply chains. And then institutions. We've got York University in Ontario has a social procurement policy, and we're working closely with BC Housing. And there's so many more, and it's growing every day. I really feel like we're at the point where social procurement is growing and growing and growing, almost to the point where there's more demand than people are aware of the supply. So as a supplier, there's so much opportunity if you can find those purchasers to connect with and really let them know about the social value that you're creating and how they can do business with you. So if you're wondering if social procurement is right for you and your organization, consider these things. Are your customers not just consumers, but could be businesses, governments, or institutions? So what are you selling and who are your customers? You need to be selling to businesses, governments, or institutions to really activate these procurement opportunities, because those are the people those are the groups practicing social procurement. And do you sell goods or services that those purchasers buy? A lot of the times, we think about goods and services like cleaning, catering. These are ones we work with as social enterprises, and all businesses purchase those items. Gifts is another big one that we work with. People purchase gifts. It's pretty easy to purchase your gifts from a social enterprise or a cooperative instead of Amazon. Amazon's getting the brunt of this call, this talk. I want to invest, and then do you want to invest in learning about procurement and competing for contracts in order to grow your business and increase your social value creation? So we really are acknowledging that you're going to have to learn about social procurement and learn about procurement if you're not already engaged in that type of activity, but there's so much potential there. If you get a big contract and you're able to scale your work, and then how does that help you scale your social value creation? Biosocial Canada offers a social enterprise certification. So you can demonstrate to potential purchasers your social value if you meet these requirements. You are a business with the majority of revenue generated by the sale of goods or services. You have a central social, environmental, or cultural mission or purpose, and you reinvest the majority of profits back into that central mission or purpose. So a lot of the social enterprises we work with in Canada are nonprofits. So their profits are already going back into the mission. We work with a few cooperative social enterprises, like I've mentioned, and they have their cooperatives set up in a way that makes it so that profit reinvestment piece is there. If you're interested in social enterprise certification, please reach out to Biosocial Canada. We would love to help you, showcase your social value and get involved in our network. As we are a social enterprise and our goal is to grow and promote social procurement, we offer a bunch of tools and resources for free open source on our website. So if you want to learn more, if you want to share information about social procurement with your team or with your colleagues, these are some great resources that are freely available. So we have here some top ones that I've selected is a guide to social procurement. That's really your 101. It includes workbooks and activities to understand social procurement from the demand side. We recently released the Supplier Guide to Social Procurement, and so that flips the Guide to Social Procurement from the demand side to the supply side and really looks to dive deeper into understanding procurement opportunities and how to access those as suppliers. And then again, on the demand side, we have the social value menu, which looks at implementation, and it looks at how does a purchaser evaluate their objectives and then implement social value into their purchasing processes, like your RFX, RFP, RF, all these different RFs. And then how do you measure and report on that? So those are a few, but there's many more on our website, and I encourage you to go check them out and explore. As I mentioned, the Supplier Guide is a new piece. It's part of our super project, which is Social Procurement Supplier Readiness. Recognizing the increase in demand for social procurement, we wanted to increase the abilities of social value suppliers, which includes social enterprises, cooperatives, social value businesses, to access those opportunities and understand procurement. So we've developed a training program that's kind of accompanies the guide. So with this program, you'll learn and understand the procurement process. You'll identify opportunities. You'll discover these opportunities through prospecting and relationship building. You'll respond to bids, and you'll deliver and demonstrate social outcomes. So this is a 4-week training program that we'll be offering in 2021. We've just putting together the schedule right now, but if you're interested in that, there's a mailing list so you can stay up to date on what's happening. Okay, wonderful. So next steps, as I mentioned, learn more with the free open source resources at biosocialcanada.com. Consider if social enterprise certification is right for you, and register your interest in the Procurement for Social Value Supplier training. My email is on the next slide, and you're welcome to reach out to me if you'd like to be added to that mailing list. And we've got, actually there's a webinar before this, so if anybody's interested or has colleagues who'd like to attend the French version of this webinar, that's going to be, I believe, on February 9th, in 2 weeks from now. And then on February 23rd, we'll be having the third webinar in this series, which is looking at social procurement again, but from that purchaser perspective, whereas today we've really been speaking about the supplier perspective. Okay, and now I'd like to open it up to the floor and hear if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Tori. That was a lot of very interesting information. Thank you for sharing everything with us. Just to kick off the Q&A, there's 2 questions that we have here. Do you have a sample social procurement policy for wording we could reference in considering what that could look like for our organizations? And the second question is, near the beginning of the presentation, Tori mentioned including a social value component in our procurement. What would that look like on a RFP?
Okay, thanks, Nadia. And thank you, Alexa. I see these questions here in the chat. So we do have a sample social procurement policy on our website. So Biosocial Canada's social procurement policy is quite simple. It is we purchase from social enterprises whenever possible. And if not, we use a concentric circle model to go further. But I'm trying to think. I know that Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative has some, they have internally some more advanced ones. And there are also municipalities who have put into place social procurement policies. When you're working on your social procurement policy, it's really important to think first about what are your organizational goals. So Biosocial Canada's organizational goals are to promote and grow social procurement, but we really have a large focus on social enterprise, like with our certification. So that's why we put social enterprise at the center of that. If we look to cities who maybe don't have as strong of a social enterprise sector, maybe their social procurement policy is really about how do they support and grow local businesses. So how do they help small and medium-sized enterprises within their communities? We've also seen objectives around living wage policies and objectives around getting opportunities for underrepresented groups. So those could be equity-seeking groups, diverse-owned, representing people who have barriers to employment and things like this. So when you're thinking about your social procurement policy, that's a good place to start. And I can try and find the link for our social procurement policy and see if there's any others I can send out in the follow-up to this webinar. For this second question, this is a great one. How do you include a social value component in your procurement? So that's really when we're thinking about it from the purchaser side of things. We recommend taking a descriptive versus a prescriptive approach. So instead of saying, you need to do this, trying to give opportunities for social value, for the bid respondents to explain different ways that they create social value. So if you look up the social value menu, right now there's 2 on our website, one for CBA and one for CEB, Community Benefit Agreement and Community Employment Benefits, but they have sample RFX language in those documents. So they could be around, again, starting with your objectives. What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve employment opportunities, training opportunities, supply chain opportunities? So for employment, you can ask, how many new hires will there be on this project? Will any of those be from underrepresented groups, or will you target underrepresented groups to be included in that hiring? Or if it's going to be supply chain, Do you track and report on the diversity of your supply chain and who your suppliers are, and trying to track contract spend in that way? So there's a whole bunch of different questions that are available in that social value menu, and we'll touch on that more in the third webinar of the series on purchasers. All right. Alexa, did that answer your questions? Do you have any follow-ups? Or does anybody else have any questions? Great. Okay, well, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes here if anybody has anything else to ask or wants to chat. I'm totally available. I guess I've gone quite speedily through this presentation, but I hope you got a lot of information and really want to inspire you to kickstart your engagement with social procurement. Cooperatives have so much potential to engage with social procurement as social value suppliers. Oh, we've got another question come in. So can we talk about municipal versus provincial versus federal procurement? So we see a lot of movement in municipalities. I think from my talk today, you've probably heard me say the word community many times. So because municipalities are working so closely with their businesses, with their taxpayers, and really trying to engage with their citizens, and they're seeing what issues their communities are facing, and they're also purchasing in their community. So we see municipalities across Canada really engaged. There's a few that I mentioned, and there's more, like Vancouver. Winnipeg is looking at introducing a social procurement policy. Halifax has a social procurement policy, although they're still in revisions on that one. But municipalities are really ones who are connected with their communities and engaged in that way. Provincially, we see a few things happening, but not tons currently right now with social procurement. The province of British Columbia has a CBA policy that is maybe not in the same way that I've described a CBA policy, and maybe more of a labor benefit agreement. But federally, we can see that Employment and Social Development Canada is really engaged in social procurement. They recognize that growing the social enterprise sector is a priority, and that social procurement is a fabulous tool for doing that. So Biosocial Canada is working with Employment and Social Development Canada and Procurement Services, Public Services and Procurement Canada, PSPC, and really trying to work with them as those who are looking at the social landscape in Canada and employment, and those who are doing a bulk of the purchasing federally, really trying to combine those efforts and put into place more social procurement initiatives federally. And I mentioned the Infrastructure Canada Project, CEP. What are the biggest hurdles and barriers to social procurement? Is it the lowest bidder mindset and practice? I think that one of the biggest barriers and hurdles is that this is huge change. This is completely transforming the way we think about purchasing, So often, and especially in our formal procurement and formal purchasing, lowest price is the priority. And we think about how we define value. And there's recently a webinar series, or sorry, not a webinar, but a podcast series from Mark Carney, who was previously the chair of the Bank of Canada and then the Bank of England. And he was looking at how do we define value? What does value mean in our society, and what does value mean in an economy? And I think in the 20th century, it was so focused on cost and businesses making a profit and getting shareholders to make money, and that's really coming at a cost that's not part of that calculation. That cost is being borne by the environment, by people who are being exploited, by BIPOC people across North America and Europe and the world who are bearing the brunt, by people who are working in factories in terrible conditions, so that a large multinational corporation can say we made a ton and our shareholders are happy. And that system we recognize is broken, but that system is how we've all been taught to think. And so really that change management and understanding that if you look at something more holistically, the lowest price has a lot of costs that aren't part of your current thinking. And you need to think about, we talk about the social return on investment. So for every $1 spent on a social enterprise that's serving a marginalized group in, say, a low income community, that person with that employment, maybe they're not, being picked up by the police. Maybe they're not spending time in the hospital. Maybe they're not, incurring all these other costs on the social system that aren't part of your calculation in choosing to buy from the multinational corporation online versus a social enterprise that's creating those income opportunities. And when we think about, poverty, one great way to, we have a blog post about this, about how do you tackle poverty? What if you start paying people and giving them income, but recognizing that not all people can or have the capabilities, or they face other barriers that are going to prevent them from working in your normalized working environment. But how do you create supportive employment that meets people where they're at and gives them all of the social capital and the well-being of, being a productive contributing member of their community? Okay, we have another question here. Is it true that the feds removed the need to go to get cabinet approval if they wanted to select a provider that was not the lowest bidder? I think we've touched on this briefly in some other calls, but I think that currently they don't need to get cabinet approval if they want to go to someone that's not the lowest bidder. Okay, thanks, Alexa. Great, thank you for your comments. Yeah, so I think we're going to be seeing, especially as Nadia mentioned, or I'm not sure if she mentioned, but IRP is wrapping up, and we're going to be seeing down the line soon what is this social finance fund going to happen next. And we're eagerly awaiting updates from the federal government for what they're going to be doing. And we're really hoping that social procurement plays a big role in that, because it's such an opportunity to increase the capacity and the capabilities of social purpose organizations, social enterprises, cooperatives to scale. And I think the social finance fund wants to see, these businesses scaling and growing. And if they can be getting contracts and growing their business, then they'll be more likely to access those investment companies and then grow more and then create more social value. Great, and thank you, Nadia. We've got 2 more upcoming webinars, and the links are in the chat if you'd like to register. Okay. All right. Okay, next question. Do we have examples of social enterprises co-ops who participated in COVID procurement? Yes, we do. So there's some great work was done. Biosocial Canada's headquarters is in Vancouver's downtown east side. So we have a lot of local context and work there. But when the kind of neighborhood was shutting down, when everybody was going into lockdown, a group came together called the COVID Community Response Network, which was nonprofit and social enterprises and kind of all the different service providers in the area came together to work really hard and met 3 times a week and really worked on their response collaboratively. And from that, we saw that the city contracted 3 social enterprises to work together to deliver food across the downtown east side, because, the normal places where people would get food, soup kitchens and cafes, everything was shut. So we need to actually feed people. And these social enterprises were delivering 2,500 meals per day to downtown east side residents. And then they were also, there was another contract where a company called Clean Start BC was contracted to do deep sanitation for the SROs, which are the single resident occupancy hotels. They're kind of like dorms with shared bathrooms and like single rooms. And these are people all living in tight, quarters with shared common areas. They did deep COVID sanitation and had huge growth in their work. And so they were growing so quickly, so Clean Start, and they had these huge contracts. So they worked with Embers, which was the construction kind of day labor company that I mentioned, social enterprise. And so Embers provided staffing to help Clean Start scale to meet those contracts. Okay. Where in the world does social procurement have the most traction and interest? There are a few places that are really leading in social procurement. Scotland has a really advanced social enterprise sector strategy and is working hard on social procurement. If we think about government procurement, in Australia, the state of Victoria has a really broad, all-encompassing social procurement policy across their purchasing that's really, we can see that the ripple effects when the policy is coming strong from the top. Okay, I think they require like 3% of purchasing either purchasing volume from dollars or contracts from social enterprises and diverse suppliers. So that's really strong there. And we can see also growth in the UK and growth in New Zealand. These are kind of countries that we're connected with, and we can see that the biosocial movement is growing. We're seeing more biosocials more and more across the world, and we're hoping to kind of really work more collaboratively in the future and try to show people, this is happening everywhere. We've got governments and corporations who are changing their purchasing in order to better serve their communities and create more value for taxpayers. So can social enterprises access the BDC? So this is something that we see the Business Development Bank of Canada. So this is something that Biosocial Canada is engaged in, but a lot of the times your traditional investment opportunities for small businesses aren't allowing nonprofits to access those. So the Business Development Canada offers loans to small businesses, but they will not offer those loans to nonprofits. And because a lot of the social enterprises are incorporated as nonprofits, they don't have access to that investment. And we see that in, and hopefully the Social Finance Fund will help that, in that, if you are a nonprofit operating as a business, it's just, people aren't used to thinking about things that way. They're not like, oh, if I can't get equity and ownership, doesn't mean you can't offer a loan with a return rate and still get value. So we're really hoping that the social finance can be changed around, and these nonprofits that are operating businesses can be treated more equally to small businesses and to get those same investment and financing opportunities. It's a great question. Thank you, Dan. So if anybody has any connections to the BDC, let me know. What are the best conversation starters to get internal buy-in? So if you're thinking about your purchasing, I know I keep hammering on Amazon, but I feel like it's like such the pinnacle of an example of everybody being addicted to the ease and the cheapness and the convenience of going online and just having things appear at your door. But really what's happening with that money is that it leaves your community. And so if you can think about a local business, and I think, not to say there's silver linings from COVID-19, but when somebody who works with supply chains, people now understand supply chains, and it's more part of the mainstream conversation than it ever has been before. And people are thinking about, supporting local businesses. And we're seeing, bring back Main Street, save Main Street, all of these local businesses that may not survive. And what does a community look like when we don't have local businesses who really are kind of part of the fabric of our communities? And that in order to survive, they need your business. And as a purchaser, you have an even larger budget than an individual. So how can you use that purchasing power to create impact in your community? Does anybody do this in Quebec? Yeah, so we work with the Chantier de l'Économie Sociale in Quebec. And so they're kind of the S4S partner in that area, and they kind of lead in that area. We're not super engaged in social procurement and the work that's being done there, but I know that the kind of social impact sector is quite strong, and we've mentioned many cooperatives in Quebec and lots of social enterprises. So they kind of have their own unique ecosystem in what they're doing around social procurement. Should I raise social procurement with staffers or elected officials to get the ball rolling locally? I think we've seen that, especially, we look at CCSBI, the Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative, the staffers are following the directives from their elected officials. The elected officials are setting the agenda. So if you can get an elected official on board with this, and we work with some social procurement champions across Canada. In the example I just gave of CCSBI, it was founded by 2 female mayors. So the mayor of Victoria and the mayor of Tofino were like, we want to make this happen. And then you can see that change. And the mayor of Tofino actually calls her, or sorry, the mayor of Victoria, Lisa Helps, calls her procurement officers her change makers, because they're the ones who are really putting this change into place. But I think that top-down leadership is really helpful to really create action, whereas staffers might feel barriered about what they're permitted to do. What is the ideal scenario for the upcoming budget that enables social procurement? I think if we can see PSPC rolling out social procurement more broadly, we've seen that the mandate letter the mandate letter at the beginning, and the updated mandate letter, they've both mentioned social procurement. So we can see this, there's intention from the federal government that social procurement is a priority. The more spend that can be going, the more pilot projects, can be putting towards including a social value in procurement, then we can hopefully see that spend going towards social value suppliers like social enterprises and cooperatives. Is CEDNET involved? CEDNET's involved, so the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, who's also a partner of S4AS. So they're really connected with advocacy and trying to work. I know they've got like the People-Centered Economy group, which Biosocial Canada is a member of, and they're definitely engaged in promoting social procurement for sure. Okay, so I've got a Q&A question here. Could you share some thoughts if we have a centralized directory marketplace for social procurement suppliers and purchasers to look up, like social enterprises and co-ops alike? Do we need such a thing? Is it better to have a centralized versus cluster approach? This is a great question. We absolutely need this. Time and time again, having that centralized directory comes up because we all want ease and convenience, and we want to make things, from our perspective, we want to make things as easy for purchasers as possible. So we definitely need this. It's in the works. It's going to happen, whether or not I don't know if it'll be by Biosocial Canada, but we're currently doing a research project on this. There's work in Quebec around creating kind of a centralized database. So it's going to happen. It needs to happen. And hopefully it'll happen sooner rather than later. What am I most excited about in the world of social procurement? I am most excited about the opportunity for social enterprise to become a mainstream business model. The number of times I have to, give a definition of social enterprise when I talk about what I do is like 95% of the time, even people who go to business school don't understand social enterprise. And for me, my background is in economics, and like really changing what value is and what the function of business is so exciting to me, because it seems like an opportunity to really turn our economies around from being extractive and exploitive to creating that community value. So if we can get to a point where social enterprise and social value businesses are our mainstream business model, I think we can get to a point where we're taking so much better care of the people and our planet. Does running a social enterprise put a charity's status at risk? I'm not super aware of all of this charity regulations, but I do know that we work with social enterprises who are also charities. I think they just have to be really clear about their business activities being related to their social purpose. But that's secondhand information. I just do know that there are charities that are social enterprises as well. So they're nonprofits who have charitable status who are operating a business. Is a B Corp a social enterprise? So when I have this conversation, I mentioned, I work in social enterprise. Do people know what that is? People a lot more of the time know what a B Corp is. And a B Corp is a business that goes through a certification, and they meet a bunch of requirements around their governance, and they're basically trying to showcase that they are a good business. But with our definition of social enterprise, they don't necessarily meet that, because that profit reinvestment piece of our social enterprise definition is really crucial, because you could have a B corporation, say, or a social value business. A good example is Tom's Shoes. So Tom's Shoes was you buy a pair and they give a pair to somebody who doesn't have shoes in like a third world country. And Tom sold Tom's Shoes for $500 million. So there's still a potential for B corporations and for these privately owned for-profit businesses to create personal individual wealth through their ownership structure. Whereas with a social enterprise, that profit reinvestment and the fact that so many of them are nonprofits, that business, the business that you're giving them, the money that you're giving that business is staying within that mission or purpose. So that's kind of the big difference there. So just because I'm involved in solar panels, it does not make me a social enterprise. That's correct, Dan. So to be a social enterprise, you would have to have special incorporation that would indicate that 50% or more of your net profits are being reinvested back into your social, environmental, or cultural mission. So having solar panels as your business, you could be a green company. And that's, I think, a great point, is really differentiating these environmental practices from the kind of social value benefits and those requirements. Pre or post-tax profits for 50%. So the 50% reinvestment has to be at the end of your fiscal year, when you've created, say, this is our pool of dividends that we're going to pay out. Then from that pool is when you have to reinvest back into your social, environmental, or cultural mission. It can be invested internally or externally back into that mission, but it has to be definitely mission focused for that reinvestment piece. And honestly, it does get quite complicated when you're trying to do that. There's special incorporations in, I believe, Nova Scotia and British Columbia for community contribution companies, which have this all in their structures, that in BC, it's the 60% is reinvested back into the mission or purpose. So that is an option for sure. But I think we're also seeing that the nonprofit model has a lot of benefits, because not only are you meeting that definition by reinvesting the majority of net profits, all of your net profits are being reinvested, but that you're also able to access grants and other funding opportunities. So how do the feds run social enterprise stats? I don't think, so we've got the social innovation and social finance recommendations or strategy came out, I think, I want to say 2017, maybe 2018. But I don't see them reporting any more broadly than that kind of initial recommendation, which I'm pretty sure include a reporting recommendation. So there's not tons of tracking on social enterprises nationally, because so many of them are nonprofits running a business type of thing, which doesn't necessarily see tracking across the country. And we also see that social enterprises, especially these nonprofits that are focused on delivering their mission, aren't necessarily recognizing that they have this revolutionary business model that's transforming the marketplace. Okay, wow. Thank you so much, Dan, and everyone who stayed on for the Q&A. Who should a social procurement win? Who should I notify if I'm aware of a social procurement win? You can let me know. Biosocial Canada has a monthly newsletter where we're promoting the latest social procurement news and updates and information on our social enterprise. So if you're aware of something happening in social procurement, especially like a policy municipally or activity in that way, or a business who's doing great work in social procurement, please let me know, and I'll make sure we kind of can spread that word more broadly, because I think adding more and more and more to that conversation of this is happening nationally, this is happening internationally, like these are all of our successes and wins, is just going to shift that needle even more. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I'll conclude today, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Co-ops and Mutuals Canada. Thank you to S4S for your sponsorship. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Dan, for all your wonderful questions. I hope you learned a lot today and that you're inspired to continue on your social procurement journey further.
Thank you so much, Tori. Thank you, everyone.